The stagecoach rattled to a halt in front of the dusty Sacramento depot, and Adelaide Turner stepped down onto California soil with eyes that had already accepted disappointment as a permanent companion. It was the summer of 1878, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the wooden buildings lining the wide street, casting sharp shadows that did nothing to hide the weariness etched into every surface. Adelaide clutched her small carpet-bag closer to her chest, her gray dress already coated with a fine layer of dust from the long journey. She had traveled all the way from Boston, following the trail of promises her late husband had left behind like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale that never had a happy ending. The town bustled with afternoon activity. Cowboys guided their horses down the main street, their boots kicking up small clouds of dirt. Women in bonnets hurried between the general store and the milliner's shop, their skirts swishing against their legs. Somewhere in the distance, a blacksmith's hammer rang against an anvil, steady as a heartbeat. Adelaide stood motionless in the midst of it all, feeling like a stone in a rushing river. "You need help finding somewhere, miss." The stage driver had already tossed down her trunk and was preparing to continue his route. "I'm looking for the Twisted Oak Ranch," Adelaide said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I was told it's about 5 miles west of town." The driver's expression shifted, something unreadable crossing his weathered features. "That's Carson land now. Old man Whitley sold it off about 6 months back." He paused, squinting at her. "You related to Whitley?" "I'm his daughter-in-law," Adelaide said, though the words tasted bitter. "I received a letter from my husband saying he'd purchased the ranch and wanted me to join him here." The driver's face softened with what could only be pity. "Madam, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but Thomas Whitley died last winter. Pneumonia took him quick. The ranch went to pay his debts, and Lucas Vaughn bought the property in March." The words should have devastated her. Perhaps they would have if Adelaide had anything left inside to break. Instead, she simply nodded, adjusted her grip on her bag, and asked, "Is there a boarding house in town?" "Mrs. Patterson runs a respectable place 2 streets over. Tell her Henry sent you." The driver tipped his hat and climbed back onto his seat, leaving Adelaide standing on the wooden sidewalk with her trunk at her feet and absolutely no plan for what came next. She had spent the last of her money on the stagecoach ticket. Thomas had promised her a new life, a fresh start away from the suffocating judgment of Boston society after her family's business had collapsed. He had written such beautiful letters about the golden California hills, about the ranch he was building, about the future they would create together. It had all been lies or delusions, or perhaps some unfortunate combination of both. Adelaide picked up her trunk, grateful it wasn't heavy since she had so little to her name, and began walking in the direction the driver had indicated. Her feet ached, her back ached, and her heart had long since grown numb to aching. She was 22 years old and felt ancient, Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was a 2-story structure painted a fading yellow, with a wraparound porch and lace curtains in the windows. Adelaide knocked, and a plump woman with kind eyes and graying hair answered. "I'm looking for a room," Adelaide said. "Henry, the stage driver, recommended you." Mrs. Patterson looked her over with the assessing gaze of someone who had seen every kind of person the West had to offer. "I charge $2 a week, meals included, payment in advance." "I can give you $3 now," Adelaide said quietly. "After that, I'll need to find employment." "Would you know of any positions available in town?" $3 will get you a week and a half, Mrs. Patterson said, her tone gentling. "Come in, child. You look like you've been traveling for days." "Weeks," Adelaide admitted, following her inside. The boarding house smelled like bread and coffee, homely and warm despite the heat outside. I came from Boston. That's quite a journey. Mrs. Patterson led her up a narrow staircase to a small but clean room with a single bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. You running from something or towards something? Adelaide set down her trunk and turned to face the older woman. I thought I was running towards something. It turns out I was wrong. Mrs. Patterson studied her for a long moment. The schoolteacher position just opened up. Miss Hendricks married a rancher last month and moved out to his property. School doesn't start until September, but the town council is interviewing candidates next week. You educated? I attended finishing school and taught piano lessons for 2 years in Boston, Adelaide said. The piano lessons had been a necessity after her father's textile business failed, leaving the family with nothing but debts and shame. Can you read and write and do sums? Yes, madam. Then you've got as good a chance as anyone. Most folks out here didn't have the advantages you Easterners did. Mrs. Patterson handed her a key. Wash up and come down for supper at 6. I'll introduce you to some of the other boarders. Someone might have other leads for work in the meantime. After Mrs. Patterson left, Adelaide sank onto the bed and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes of complete despair. She had been married to Thomas for less than a year when he had announced he was going west to make their fortune. She had begged to come with him, but he had insisted she stay in Boston until he was established. For 8 months, she had received optimistic letters describing his progress. Then the letters had stopped. She had waited another 4 months before selling everything she owned to buy the stagecoach ticket. And now she was here, alone in a town where she knew no one, with no husband and no prospects. The doubt that had been her constant companion since her wedding day felt justified now. She had doubted Thomas's grand plans, doubted his promises, doubted her own judgment in marrying him when her parents had urged her to accept a different suitor. Every doubt had proven correct. Adelaide stood, poured water from the pitcher into the basin, and washed her face and hands. She changed into her other dress, a dark blue calico that was slightly less wrinkled than the gray, and pinned her dark blonde hair into a fresh bun. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a woman who looked older than her years, with shadows under her blue eyes and hollows in her cheeks. The journey had taken its toll. At 6 o'clock, she made her way downstairs to find a long table set for 8. Mrs. Patterson introduced her to the other boarders. A young couple who ran the telegraph office, an elderly gentleman who worked at the bank, a widow who took in sewing, and 2 cowboys who were in town between cattle drives. "This is Mrs. Turner," Mrs. Patterson announced. "She's just arrived from Boston and will be applying for the schoolteacher position." "We surely need a teacher," said the telegraph operator's wife, a friendly woman named Sarah. "The children have been without proper schooling for nearly 2 months now." Supper was beef stew and fresh bread, and Adelaide ate mechanically, answering questions about her journey when asked but volunteering little else. She was aware of the curious glances, the speculation in people's eyes. A young widow traveling alone from Boston was unusual enough to warrant gossip. After supper, she retreated to her room and sat by the window, watching the sun set over the unfamiliar landscape. Sacramento was so different from Boston. Everything felt wider here, more open, as if the land itself refused to be contained by human structures and conventions. In Boston, she had always felt confined by society's expectations, by the narrow streets and tall buildings, by the weight of her family's failure. Here, she felt untethered, adrift in all that openness with nothing to anchor her. The next morning, Adelaide set out to explore the town and inquire about work. She stopped at the general store, the hotel restaurant, and the milliner's shop, but no one was hiring. By noon, She found herself walking toward the edge of town, drawn by she knew not what, until she reached the beginning of the road that led west toward what had once been called the Twisted Oak Ranch. She stood there for a long moment, staring down that dusty road. Part of her wanted to walk those 5 miles and see the place Thomas had written about so enthusiastically. But what would be the point? It belonged to someone else now. That dream was as dead as her husband. You look like you're trying to decide whether to turn back or keep going. The voice startled her. Adelaide turned to find a man on horseback, clearly a cowboy from his wide-brimmed hat, worn leather chaps, and the easy way he sat in the saddle. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and green eyes that held something other than the pity or curiosity she had seen in everyone else's gaze. He looked at her with genuine interest, as if she were a person rather than a puzzle to be solved or a story to be gossiped about. "I was just walking," Adelaide said, drawing herself up straighter. "Not that it's any of your concern." "True enough," the cowboy agreed, but he didn't ride on. Instead, he dismounted with fluid grace and walked his horse closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "But this road doesn't lead anywhere except to my ranch, and you don't look dressed for a 5-mile walk in this heat." "Your ranch?" Adelaide's heart sank. "Of course. You must be Lucas Vaughn." Surprise flickered across his face. "I am. How did you know?" "I'm Adelaide Turner," she said, and watched his expression shift as he made the connection. "I arrived yesterday. The stage driver informed me of my husband's death and the sale of the property." Lucas removed his hat, and Adelaide noticed his hands, calloused and strong, hands that knew hard work. "Mrs. Turner, I'm sorry for your loss. I bought the ranch in good faith from the creditors. Your husband had accumulated significant debts in town before he passed." "I'm sure he did." Adelaide kept her voice level, refusing to show the shame that heated her cheeks. Thomas had a talent for spending money he didn't have and making promises he couldn't keep. Lucas studied her for a long moment, and Adelaide had the unsettling feeling he could see past her carefully maintained composure to the desperation beneath. "That's a hard thing to say about your late husband. It's the truth. And I've learned that the truth, however hard, is preferable to beautiful lies." She smoothed her skirt, aware that she was standing on a dusty road having a conversation with a stranger about her deepest disappointments. "I should return to town. I apologize for trespassing on your property." "You didn't trespass. The road's public until you reach my gate, which is another 3 miles up." He settled his hat back on his head. "Mrs. Patterson's got a good boarding house. You should be comfortable there." "How did you know I was staying with Mrs. Patterson?" A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Sacramento's not a big town. Word travels fast. Henry mentioned you'd arrived on yesterday's stage, looking for the Twisted Oak Ranch, and Mrs. Patterson told half the people at the Mercantile that she had a new boarder from Boston applying for the schoolteacher position." He paused. "There aren't many secrets here. It's one of the things I like about it, and one of the things that drives me crazy." Despite everything, Adelaide felt her lips quirk in what might have been the ghost of a smile. In Boston, there were plenty of secrets. They just hid behind a veneer of respectability. "I suspect that's true in a lot of places." Lucas glanced up at the sun, gauging the time in the way of men who lived by natural rhythms rather than pocket watches. "I need to get these supplies back to the ranch, but I want you to know something, Mrs. Turner. Your husband wasn't a bad man. He was in over his head, true enough, but he worked hard while he was here. He just didn't understand cattle ranching or the business of it. The ranch was failing when he bought it, and he didn't have the experience or the capital to turn it around." Adelaide wasn't sure if this was meant to comfort her or not. Did you know him well? Well enough to have a few conversations. He talked about you often. Said you were the smartest person he knew, that you played piano like an angel, and that you deserved better than what he'd given you so far. Lucas's green eyes were steady on hers. He meant to send for you once he got things established. I don't think he was lying to you on purpose, Mrs. Turner. I think he was lying to himself, and that's a different kind of tragedy. The observation was more insightful than Adelaide expected from a cowboy she'd just met. She found she had no response that wouldn't reveal too much about the complicated grief she felt for a man she had never really loved, but had tried very hard to honor as a wife should. "Thank you for telling me," she said finally. "It's something, at least, to know he thought of me." "More than thought," Lucas said. "When he was dying, he asked me to write to you and tell you not to come. He didn't want you to see him that way, or to see how far the dream had fallen short of reality." He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable for the first time. "I sent the letter, but I guess it came too late or didn't arrive at all. I never received it." Adelaide felt something loosen in her chest, some tight knot of anger she hadn't fully acknowledged until this moment. "I wish I had. It would have saved me a difficult journey." "Maybe," Lucas allowed. "Or maybe you needed to make the journey anyway. Sometimes we have to see the end of a thing with our own eyes before we can really let it go." There was wisdom in that, though Adelaide wasn't ready to admit it. She inclined her head. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Vaughn. I should let you get back to your work." "Good luck with the teaching position," he said, mounting his horse with the same easy grace. "The children here need someone like you, someone educated and capable." He touched the brim of his hat in farewell and rode off down the western road, leaving Adelaide standing in the dusty heat with her thoughts in turmoil. Lucas Vaughn was not what she had expected. She had imagined the man who bought her husband's failed dream would be harsh or opportunistic, someone taking advantage of another's misfortune. Instead, he seemed thoughtful and honest, with a directness she found both unsettling and refreshing after years of navigating Boston's social niceties. She walked back to town slowly, trying to sort through the tangled emotions the encounter had stirred up. Learning that Thomas had tried to spare her this journey, that he had at least that much consideration for her in the end, should have brought comfort. Instead, it just highlighted how badly they had failed to truly know each other. They had been two people caught in circumstances neither could control, making the best choices they could with limited options. Over the next few days, Adelaide prepared for her interview with the school board. Mrs. Patterson loaned her books to review, and Sarah from the telegraph office filled her in on the children who would be her students if she got the position. Adelaide learned there were about 30 children in town and the surrounding ranches who needed schooling, ranging in age from 6 to 14. The interview was held in the town hall on a Thursday afternoon. 5 men sat in judgment: the mayor, a portly man named Mr. Griffin, the bank manager, Mr. Winters, who boarded at Mrs. Patterson's, the owner of the general store, the doctor, and Lucas Vaughn. Adelaide had not expected to see Lucas on the school board, and her surprise must have shown on her face because he gave her a slight nod, his expression neutral. "Mrs. Turner," Mayor Griffin began, shuffling through some papers on the table. "We've received your application and reviewed your qualifications. You attended finishing school in Boston and worked as a piano instructor. However, you have no formal teaching experience with children in an academic setting. Can you explain why you believe you're qualified for this position?" Adelaide had anticipated this question. She folded her hands in her lap and met each man's gaze in turn. "It's true I haven't taught in a traditional school setting, but I have worked with students of varying ages and abilities. Teaching piano requires patience, the ability to explain concepts in multiple ways until they are understood, and the skill to manage different learning paces. I'm well versed in reading, writing, mathematics, history, and geography. I understand that frontier schools often require teachers to be flexible and resourceful, and my circumstances have certainly taught me both those qualities. Why did you come to California, Mrs. Turner? Asked Mr. Winters, though from the way he phrased it, Adelaide suspected he already knew the answer. I came to join my late husband, who I believed had established a ranch here. I learned upon arrival that he had passed away and the property had been sold to satisfy his debts. She kept her voice steady, refusing to show shame or weakness. I find myself in need of employment, and I have skills that I believe would benefit this community. You're a widow, the general store owner said bluntly, young and alone. Some parents might have concerns about propriety or about you leaving once you remarry. I understand those concerns, Adelaide said, though indignation flared hot in her chest. I can assure you that I take any commitment I make seriously. If you hire me as schoolteacher, I will dedicate myself fully to that role. As for remarriage, I have no such plans. My focus is on building an independent life for myself. Lucas spoke for the first time. Mrs. Turner strikes me as someone who understands responsibility and follows through on her obligations. She traveled across the country alone to honor a commitment to her husband, even though it would have been easier to simply stay in Boston. That shows character and determination. I think those are exactly the qualities we want modeling for our children. Adelaide met his gaze, surprised by his advocacy. His green eyes held steady, and she saw nothing in them but sincerity. The mayor cleared his throat. Well, the position pays $40 a month, plus living quarters in the small cottage behind the schoolhouse. School runs Monday through Friday, September through May, with breaks for planting and harvest as needed. You'd be expected to teach all ages and all subjects, maintain order in the classroom, and coordinate with parents about student progress. Are those terms acceptable? Very acceptable, Adelaide said, hardly daring to believe this was happening. Then the position is yours, Mrs. Turner. You can move into the cottage next week, and we'll expect you to be ready to begin instruction on September 3rd. Adelaide walked back to the boarding house in a daze. She had a job. She had a future, or at least the beginnings of one. When she told Mrs. Patterson the news, the older woman hugged her tightly. I knew you'd get it, Mrs. Patterson said. You've got that quality about you, like you won't be defeated no matter what life throws at you. I don't feel that way inside, Adelaide admitted. Nobody does, child. That's the secret everyone learns eventually. We're all just doing our best and hoping it's good enough. Mrs. Patterson released her and bustled toward the kitchen. This calls for a celebration. I'll make my special apple cake for dessert tonight. The following Tuesday, Adelaide moved her few belongings into the teacher's cottage. It was small, just 2 rooms with a fireplace and a tiny kitchen area, but it was clean and private and hers. She spent the week before school started preparing the classroom, reviewing textbooks, and planning lessons. The schoolhouse was a simple wooden structure with rows of benches and desks, a blackboard at the front, and windows that let in the California sunshine. She was sweeping the front steps on Saturday afternoon when a wagon pulled up. Lucas Vaughn climbed down and began unloading furniture from the back. Mr. Vaughn, Adelaide said, setting down her broom. What are you doing? Bringing you a desk and chair, he said, maneuvering a beautiful oak desk down from the wagon. The old teacher used her own furniture and took it with her when she married. Figured you'd need something for your cottage. I can't accept this, Adelaide protested, even as she admired the craftsmanship of the desk. It was clearly handmade with careful joinery and a smooth finish. Why not? Lucas set the desk down and went back for the chair. Because it's too generous, I barely know you. It's a desk, Lucas said matter-of-factly. You need one for planning lessons and grading work. I had it in storage at the ranch. I made it a few years back when I thought I might do more woodworking, but it turns out I'm better with cattle than carpentry. It should be used by someone who'll appreciate it. Adelaide didn't know what to say. She had grown so accustomed to suspicion, to doubt, that straightforward kindness left her off balance. You made this yourself. I did. It's not perfect, see that joint there. It's slightly uneven. But it's solid and functional. He carried the chair to the cottage door. Where do you want it? By the window, I suppose, Adelaide said, opening the door wider to let him through. Lucas positioned the desk and chair in the cottage's main room, where afternoon light streamed through the window. There. Now you can sit and prepare your lessons with a proper workspace. Thank you, Adelaide said quietly. This is very kind. It's practical, Lucas corrected, but his eyes warmed when he smiled. A good teacher needs good tools, same as a good cowboy. How long have you been on the school board? Adelaide asked, curious about this man who kept surprising her. 2 years. I'm the representative for the outlying ranches. Several of my ranch hands have children who need schooling, and I want to make sure they get the same opportunities as the town kids. He leaned against the door frame, relaxed and at ease. Education matters out here, maybe more than it does in places like Boston. Out here, being able to read a contract or calculate fair prices can mean the difference between success and failure. Is that what happened to my husband? He couldn't calculate fair prices. Lucas considered the question seriously. Partly. He also didn't understand cattle, didn't know the land, and bought the ranch at a time when it was already struggling. Ranching isn't something you can just decide to do one day. It takes years of learning, and even then, there are factors you can't control. Weather, disease, market prices. Your husband was optimistic and determined, but those qualities alone aren't enough. He was always that way, Adelaide said. Optimistic to the point of delusion. I tried to be the practical one, but he never wanted to hear about limitations or potential problems. He wanted to believe everything would work out simply because he wanted it to. And you're the opposite, Lucas observed. You expect the worst, so you're never disappointed. The accuracy of the statement stung. Is it that obvious? Only because I recognize it. I used to be the same way. He straightened, preparing to leave. Life has a way of beating the optimism out of people. But the thing is, Mrs. Turner, expecting the worst doesn't protect you from pain. It just makes you miserable before the pain even arrives. Sometimes things do work out. Sometimes people are kind for no reason other than wanting to be kind. Sometimes you get exactly what you need right when you need it most. After he left, Adelaide sat at her new desk for a long time, running her hands over the smooth wood and thinking about what he'd said. She had been living with doubt and suspicion for so long that she had forgotten how to recognize genuine goodness. Every kind gesture felt like a trap, every offer of help like a transaction with hidden costs. School began on the 3rd of September, and Adelaide found herself facing 30 curious children of varying ages and levels of education. She organized them by ability rather than age, creating groups that could work together while she moved between them. The first few days were chaotic as she learned each child's strengths and struggles, but gradually a routine emerged. She was strict but fair, patient when students struggled but firm when they didn't put in effort. She taught reading and writing, mathematics and history, and on Friday afternoons, she incorporated music lessons, teaching the children simple songs. She didn't have a piano, but her voice was clear and true, and the children loved singing together. Lucas began appearing at the schoolhouse every Saturday afternoon, always with some practical offering. One week it was a bookshelf he had made. Another week, firewood stacked neatly beside her cottage. Then a rocking chair for her porch, and a small table, and once, a basket of vegetables from his ranch garden. "You don't need to keep bringing me things," Adelaide told him after he delivered a box of apples in early October. "I'm not bringing them to you specifically," Lucas said, though his eyes held amusement. "I'm providing for the schoolteacher. It's an investment in the community's future." That's a very diplomatic way of phrasing charity. It's not charity if you're earning it, and you are. "I've heard from the parents that the children are actually excited about school now. Sarah's niece told her that you make history interesting by telling it like stories instead of just dates to memorize." Adelaide felt warmth spread through her chest at the praise. "They're good children. Eager to learn. Because they have a good teacher." Lucas leaned against the porch railing, his expression turning more serious. "Can I ask you something, Mrs. Turner?" "Adelaide," she said. "If you're going to keep appearing at my cottage with furniture and food, you should probably use my given name." "Adelaide, then. And I'm Lucas." He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "Why do you still doubt every kind gesture? What happened to make you so suspicious of basic human decency?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm not suspicious." "You are. Every time I bring you something, you look for the trap. You examine every gift like it might bite you. You're waiting for me to ask for something in return." Adelaide looked away, embarrassed by his perception. "In my experience, people don't do things without expecting something back. That's a sad way to live. It's a realistic way to live." Lucas was quiet for a moment, and when Adelaide finally looked at him, she found him watching her with something that looked like understanding rather than judgment. "What happened, Adelaide? What made you stop trusting?" She shouldn't tell him. She barely knew him. But there was something about the way he asked, with genuine curiosity rather than prying gossip, that loosened her tongue. "My father owned a textile business in Boston. When I was 19, it failed. Not through any fault of his own. A business partner embezzled funds and disappeared, leaving my father to shoulder the debt. We lost everything. Our house, our standing in society, our friends who couldn't associate with failure. That's when you started giving piano lessons," Lucas said, putting pieces together. "Yes, my mother took in sewing and I gave lessons to support the family. Then Thomas appeared. He was charming, full of big plans, and he said he didn't care about my family's fall from grace. He said we'd go west together and build something new. I thought." She trailed off, unsure how to articulate the complicated mix of hope and pragmatism that had led to her marriage. "You thought he was offering you a way out," Lucas finished for her. "A chance to escape the judgment and start over." "Exactly. But he left without me, and his letters were full of promises that never materialized. And every time I hoped, every time I let myself believe things might work out, I was proven wrong. So yes, I learned to doubt. I learned that hope is just another word for setting yourself up for disappointment." Lucas settled his hat back on his head. "I'm sorry that was your experience. But Adelaide, not everyone is your father's business partner or your late husband. Some people do what they say they'll do. Some people mean their promises. How do you know which is which until it's too late? You don't. That's what trust is, taking the risk even though you might be wrong." He moved toward his horse. "I'm not asking for anything from you, Adelaide. No hidden costs, no expectations. I bring you things because I want to, because you need them, and because it gives me satisfaction to help someone who's working hard to build a new life. That's all." After he rode away, Adelaide stood on her porch for a long time, watching the sun set over the Sacramento hills. Lucas confused her. He was patient where Thomas had been impulsive, steady where Thomas had been erratic. He seemed content with silence, didn't fill every moment with grand declarations or promises. He simply showed up, did thoughtful things, and asked nothing in return. It terrified her. October gave way to November, and the weather turned cooler. Adelaide settled into the rhythm of teaching, finding satisfaction in watching her students' progress. The ranch children who had never learned to read were sounding out words. The older students who had struggled with mathematics were understanding concepts they'd previously found impossible. She felt, for the first time since her father's business had collapsed, that she was building something real and valuable. Lucas continued his Saturday visits, though they evolved from deliveries to conversations. He would bring something practical: coffee, sugar, candles, and then linger on the porch, talking with Adelaide about everything and nothing. She learned he had come to California 5 years ago from Missouri, worked as a ranch hand for 3 years, and saved enough to buy the twisted oak when it came up for sale. Wasn't it risky? Adelaide asked one Saturday in late November as they sat on her porch, wrapped in coats against the chill. Buying a failing ranch, sure, it was risky, but everything worth doing involves risk. Lucas stretched his long legs out in front of him. I could have played it safe, stayed a ranch hand, saved more money, but I would have been working toward someone else's dream instead of my own. Thomas believed the same thing. It didn't work out well for him. The difference is, I knew what I was getting into. I'd spent 3 years learning every aspect of ranching. I understood cattle, land management, market fluctuations. I calculated the risk and decided the potential reward was worth it. He glanced at her. Your husband jumped in with enthusiasm but no knowledge. That's not the same thing. You make it sound simple. It's not simple at all. I've made mistakes, plenty of them. The first winter, I lost a dozen head of cattle because I didn't prepare adequately for a hard freeze. Last spring, I paid too much for a breeding bull that turned out to be aggressive and had to be sold off at a loss. But I learn from the mistakes and adjust. That's the difference between calculated risk and blind optimism. Adelaide absorbed this, seeing the wisdom in it. I think I've been so afraid of making mistakes that I've stopped taking any risks at all. Is that why you haven't decorated your cottage, made it feel like home? The observation surprised her. Adelaide looked through the open door at the sparse interior. She had the furniture Lucas had brought, a few books, her clothes, but she hadn't hung anything on the walls, hadn't added any personal touches. I suppose I didn't want to get too comfortable. In case it doesn't last, Adelaide. Lucas's voice was gentle but firm. You have a job contract through May. That's 8 more months. Even if you decided not to renew it, that's enough time to deserve a comfortable living space. You're allowed to make yourself at home. I'll think about it, she said, which they both knew meant she wouldn't. Lucas stood, preparing to leave. Come out to the ranch next Saturday. I'll show you what I've done with the property, and you can see it before winter really sets in. Bring your memories of what your husband described in his letters, and maybe you can put them to rest properly. Adelaide wanted to refuse. Visiting the ranch felt dangerous, like picking at a wound that hadn't quite healed. But Lucas waited patiently, not pressuring, just offering, and she found herself nodding. All right, I'll come. I'll pick you up at 9 in the morning. Wear practical clothes. It's a working ranch, not a parlor. That Saturday, Adelaide dressed in her oldest dress and sturdiest shoes, tying her hair back with a simple ribbon. When Lucas arrived with the wagon, she climbed up beside him, her heart beating faster than the situation warranted. The ride out of town was pleasant. The November air was crisp, but not cold, and the California hills rolled golden brown beneath a cloudless sky. Lucas pointed out landmarks as they drove. The creek where cattle came to water, the boundary markers of neighboring properties, the grove of oaks that had given the ranch its name. The ranch house came into view after about 45 minutes. It was a solid structure, larger than Adelaide had expected, built of timber and stone with a wide porch and a green roof. Corrals stretched out behind it, and she could see cattle grazing in distant pastures. "You've done well," Adelaide said, meaning it. "It's been a lot of work, but it's starting to feel like it's mine rather than something I bought." Lucas helped her down from the wagon. "Come on, I'll show you around." He walked her through the property, explaining improvements he'd made. New fencing, a repaired barn, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. He introduced her to his small crew, 3 cowboys who worked the cattle, and a Mexican woman named Rosa who cooked for everyone and kept the house. Rosa embraced Adelaide warmly. "Lucas talks about the schoolteacher all the time. It's good to finally meet you." "I hope he said good things," Adelaide said, shooting Lucas a questioning look. "Only that you're intelligent, dedicated, and far too suspicious of people's motives," Lucas said with a perfectly straight face. Rosa laughed. "He also says you have the prettiest blue eyes he's ever seen, but I suppose that's not relevant." Adelaide felt her cheeks heat while Lucas looked at Rosa with mock betrayal. "You weren't supposed to mention that part." "Why not? It's true, isn't it?" Rosa winked at Adelaide. "Come, let me show you the house while Lucas pretends he didn't just turn red as a tomato." The house was warm and comfortable, clearly a bachelor's space but clean and well organized. Rosa showed her the main room with its stone fireplace, the kitchen with its large table, and gestured toward the hallway where bedrooms must be. "He's a good man," Rosa said quietly, serious now. "Sometimes too good. He gives and doesn't always think about what he needs for himself, but with you, I think maybe he's learning to be a little selfish." "I don't understand," Adelaide said. "He likes you. More than likes you. And he's letting himself want something just for himself, not because it's practical or helps the ranch or benefits the community. Just because it makes him happy." Rosa squeezed Adelaide's hand. "Don't hurt him, Senora. He seems strong, but a good heart is always fragile." Before Adelaide could respond, Lucas appeared in the doorway. "Rosa, stop trying to scare off my guest. Adelaide, come see the view from the back porch." The view was spectacular. The porch looked out over rolling hills that seemed to stretch forever, golden in the autumn light. Adelaide could see why Thomas had been seduced by this landscape, by the promise of all this open space and possibility. "What did your husband tell you about the ranch in his letters?" Lucas asked, leaning against the porch railing beside her. "He said it was beautiful. That the land was rich and perfect for cattle, that the house was charming and the hills went on forever." Adelaide smiled slightly. "He wasn't wrong about any of that, but he left out the hard parts, the isolation, the constant work, the financial pressures. Thomas always focused on the beautiful parts of things. It was one of the qualities that drew me to him initially, his ability to see the best in everything. But it also meant he couldn't prepare for difficulties because he didn't want to acknowledge they existed." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Do you miss him?" Adelaide considered the question honestly. "I miss the idea of him. I miss having a partner, or at least the hope of one. But the real Thomas, I'm not sure I ever really knew him well enough to miss him properly. We were married less than a year, and he was only actually present for a few months of that. The rest was letters that may or may not have reflected reality. That must be lonely, being married but alone." "I've been lonely most of my life," Adelaide admitted, "even when surrounded by people." "Maybe especially then." Lucas reached out and took her hand, the gesture so simple and natural that Adelaide didn't think to pull away until she felt the warmth of his calloused palm against hers. "You don't have to be lonely here. Sacramento may be small, but there are good people. People who would be your friend if you let them." "I let them," Adelaide protested. "You're polite to them, friendly even, but you don't let anyone actually know you. You keep everyone at arm's length." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "Including me, though I'm doing my best to be patient about it." Adelaide's heart hammered in her chest. "Lucas, I can't. It's too soon. Thomas has only been gone 10 months. I know, and I'm not asking you to feel anything you're not ready to feel. I'm just asking you to stop assuming the worst of everyone who tries to get close to you. Can you do that?" She wanted to pull her hand away, to retreat into the safety of her doubt and suspicion. But Rosa's words echoed in her mind, and so did her own words to Lucas weeks ago about learning to doubt because hope had failed her too many times. Was she really going to spend the rest of her life expecting disappointment? Was that any way to live? "I can try," she said quietly. Lucas smiled, and Adelaide felt something shift in her chest, some long frozen part of her beginning to thaw. "That's all I'm asking. Just try." They spent the rest of the day at the ranch. Lucas showed her how he managed the herd, explained his breeding program, and introduced her to his favorite horse, a sorrel mare named Copper. Rosa served them lunch beef tamales and fresh tortillas, and regaled Adelaide with stories about Lucas's early days on the ranch when he'd worked 18-hour days and forgotten to eat unless someone put food directly in front of him. "He's better now," Rosa said. "But still, he works too hard." "Maybe you can teach him about balance." "No, I don't think I'm qualified to teach anyone about balance," Adelaide said. "I work 6 days a week and spend my Sundays preparing lessons. See, you're perfect for each other, two people who don't know when to rest." Rosa shook her head in mock despair. "I'm surrounded by workhorses." The afternoon sun was angling low when Lucas drove Adelaide back to town. She was tired but felt more peaceful than she had in months. The ranch wasn't the dream Thomas had described, but it was something real and solid, built by hard work and practical planning. Seeing it had helped her let go of the fantasy she'd been carrying. "Thank you for today," Adelaide said as Lucas helped her down from the wagon in front of her cottage. It helped, seeing the place, understanding what he was trying to do. "I'm glad." Lucas held her hand a moment longer than necessary. "Adelaide, can I court you? Properly, I mean. Not just showing up with firewood and vegetables, but actually courting you." Adelaide's breath caught. She wanted to say no to protect herself from potential hurt. But she was tired of being afraid, tired of doubting everything and everyone. Lucas had been nothing but patient and kind. He had earned at least a chance. "Yes," she said, and watched his face light up with a joy so pure it made her chest ache. "But slowly. I need time." "I've got all the time in the world," Lucas said. "I'll pick you up next Saturday at 6. There's a dance at the town hall. Will you come with me? I haven't danced in years. Then it's about time you started again." After he left, Adelaide sat in her cottage and allowed herself to feel the flutter of anticipation she'd been suppressing. She was going to a dance with Lucas. It felt both terrifying and exciting, like standing at the edge of something vast and unknown. That week, Sarah helped Adelaide alter one of her dresses to be more suitable for dancing. It was a deep green that brought out her eyes, with a full skirt and fitted bodice. Adelaide felt foolish spending time on vanity, but Sarah was insistent. "You deserve to feel pretty," Sarah said, pinning the hem. "And you deserve to have a nice evening with a good man. Lucas Vaughn has been half in love with you since the day you arrived. Anyone can see that." "That's not true. He only met me because I was walking toward his ranch. And he's been finding excuses to see you ever since." Sarah sat back, surveying her work. "Why does that scare you so much?" "Because I don't trust it. Good things don't just happen to me." "Maybe it's time they started." Sarah handed her the dress. "Try it on. Let's see if we got the fit right." The dress fit perfectly. Adelaide barely recognized herself in the mirror. She looked younger, softer, less weighed down by disappointment. Saturday arrived, and Lucas appeared at her door at exactly 6 o'clock, wearing clean trousers, a pressed shirt, and a vest, his hair neatly combed. He looked at Adelaide like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "You look lovely," he said simply. "Thank you. You look quite handsome yourself." The dance was already lively when they arrived. Someone was playing a fiddle, and couples spun around the floor in patterns Adelaide vaguely remembered from her youth. Lucas led her into the mix, and to her surprise, she remembered how to follow his lead. They danced 3 songs before taking a break, both breathless and laughing. "You said you hadn't danced in years," Lucas said, bringing her a cup of punch. "I haven't. Apparently, it's like riding a horse. The body remembers even when the mind thinks it's forgotten." They danced more, talked with neighbors, and Adelaide felt herself relaxing in a way she hadn't since before her father's business failed. She wasn't thinking about the future or worrying about potential problems. She was just here now, enjoying the music and the company and the feeling of Lucas's hand at her waist. When the evening ended and Lucas walked her home, he stopped at her door but made no move to come inside. "I had a wonderful time tonight, Adelaide." "So did I." And she meant it. "Can I see you again? Maybe Sunday after church. We could take a picnic up to the Oak Grove." "I'd like that." Lucas leaned forward slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he kissed her forehead gently. "Good night, Adelaide." "Good night, Lucas." She watched him walk away, her hand pressed to where he'd kissed her, feeling like something fundamental had shifted. As autumn turned to winter, Lucas and Adelaide spent more and more time together. They took long walks around town, had Sunday picnics when the weather allowed, and sat on her porch talking until the stars came out. Lucas told her about his childhood in Missouri, about the brother he'd lost to illness and the parents who had died in a house fire, leaving him alone at 17. Adelaide shared more about her life in Boston, about the shame of her family's fall, and the pressure she'd felt to marry someone, anyone, who could restore their standing. "That's why you married Thomas," Lucas said one December evening as they sat by her fireplace, drinking coffee to ward off the winter chill. "Not because you loved him, but because he offered escape." "I wanted to love him," Adelaide said. "I tried, but you can't force feelings that aren't there." "No, you can't." Lucas set down his coffee cup. "Adelaide, I need to tell you something, and I don't want you to feel pressured by it, but I believe in honesty and I can't keep pretending." Adelaide's heart began to race. "All right, I'm in love with you. I have been since that first day when you were standing on the road, looking like you were trying to decide whether to give up or keep fighting, and you chose to keep fighting. I've fallen more in love with you every time we've talked, every time you've let me see past that wall you've built around yourself. I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I know you might need more time, or you might never feel the same, and that's your right. But I needed you to know where I stand." Adelaide stared at him, emotions warring in her chest. Part of her wanted to run, to protect herself from this vulnerability. But a larger part, a part that was tired of being afraid, wanted to lean into the warmth of what Lucas was offering. "I don't know if I know how to love someone properly," she said finally. "I'm not sure I ever did it right with Thomas, and I'm scared, Lucas. I'm scared of wanting something and then losing it, or worse, getting it and discovering it's not real." "Those are all valid fears," Lucas said. "And I can't promise you'll never be hurt or disappointed. Life doesn't work that way. But I can promise that I'll be honest with you, that I'll work every day to earn your trust, and that I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to go." Adelaide reached out and took his hand, that simple gesture that had become familiar between them. I think I might be falling in love with you too. It terrifies me. Lucas squeezed her hand. Then we'll be terrified together. That seems fair. She laughed, and the sound surprised her when had laughter become so easy again. This is completely irrational. I've only known you for a few months. Some people know after a few minutes. Some people take years. There's no right timeline for this. Boston would be scandalized. I'm not even a year widowed. Good thing we're in California then. Lucas pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Adelaide, what happened with your late husband is sad, but you weren't truly married in any meaningful sense. You spent a few months together, then he left, and you've spent more time alone than with him. You're allowed to move forward with your life. It feels disloyal. To who? To a man you didn't really love, who left you behind, who died without making provisions for you. Adelaide, Thomas would probably want you to be happy. And if he doesn't, well, that's his problem, not yours. The bluntness of it made Adelaide smile despite herself. You have a way of cutting through my overthinking. Someone has to. You could spend years talking yourself in circles. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Stay here with me tonight. Just talking, nothing improper. I just want to sit with you and watch the fire and not have to say goodnight yet. They stayed up until past midnight, wrapped in quilts, talking about everything and nothing. Adelaide told him about teaching, about the small victories when a struggling student finally understood a concept, about the way 8-year-old Tommy Richards had drawn her a picture of a horse, as thanks for helping him learn to read. Lucas told her about the new calves expected in spring, about his plans to expand the ranch over the next few years, about the satisfaction of building something lasting. Eventually, Adelaide fell asleep against his shoulder, and Lucas carefully carried her to her bed, tucked her in, and let himself out, locking the door behind him. When Adelaide woke the next morning to find herself in bed fully dressed with a note on her nightstand, didn't want to leave you on the couch. See you after church. L. She felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the quilt. Christmas approached, and Adelaide threw herself into preparing a holiday pageant for the school. The children rehearsed songs and recitations, and she coordinated with parents to create simple costumes. Lucas donated lumber to build a makeshift stage and spent several evenings helping construct it. You're good with the children, Adelaide observed, watching him show Tommy Richards how to hammer a nail properly. I like kids. Hope to have a few of my own someday. He glanced at her meaningfully, and Adelaide felt her cheeks warm. The pageant was a tremendous success. The whole town turned out to watch the children perform, and Adelaide felt a swell of pride as her students recited poetry, sang carols, and reenacted the nativity story. Afterward, parents thanked her with gifts of baked goods, preserves, and one particularly lovely knitted shawl. You've given this town a real gift, Mayor Griffin told her. The children are thriving under your instruction. Lucas drove her home that night, the wagon filled with her gifts from grateful parents. You should be proud, he said. You've made a real difference here. I feel like I finally found something I'm good at, something that matters. You're good at a lot of things, but yes, teaching suits you. He helped her carry everything inside, then paused at the door. Adelaide, I have something for you, a Christmas gift. Lucas, you've given me so much already. This is different. He pulled a small wrapped package from his coat pocket. Open it. Inside was a delicate silver locket on a chain. Adelaide opened it to find space for 2 small portraits. It's beautiful. You could put a picture of your parents in it, or students, or someday, maybe family you build here. His meaning was clear. Adelaide threw her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. Thank you. For this and for everything. For being patient with me. Lucas held her close, his arms strong and steady around her. You're worth the patience. They stood like that for a long moment, and when Adelaide pulled back slightly to look up at him, Lucas cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. Not her forehead this time, but her lips, gentle and questioning. Adelaide kissed him back, letting herself feel everything she'd been holding back, the want, the hope, the terrifying possibility that maybe this could work. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Adelaide. I'll keep saying it until you believe it." "I'm starting to believe it," she whispered. "That's progress. It's more than progress, it's everything." Winter settled over Sacramento, and Adelaide's relationship with Lucas deepened. He came to town more frequently, often staying for supper at her cottage. She visited the ranch on Sundays, helping Rosa in the kitchen and getting to know the ranch hands. Slowly, almost without noticing, Adelaide's cottage began to transform. She hung curtains, added personal touches, displayed the books she loved most. She was making a home, not just occupying space. In February, a brutal storm hit, bringing freezing rain and high winds. School was canceled for 3 days, and Adelaide was snowed in at her cottage. On the third day, Lucas appeared at her door, covered in ice and looking exhausted. "What are you doing here?" Adelaide pulled him inside quickly. "You could have frozen to death riding in this weather." "I needed to make sure you were all right. You're alone out here, and if something happened—" He broke off, shaking snow from his coat. "Lucas, I'm fine. I have firewood and supplies." But even as she scolded him, Adelaide felt touched by his concern. She helped him out of his frozen coat and sat him by the fire, wrapping blankets around him. "You could have died out there, but I didn't, and now I know you're safe." His teeth were chattering. Adelaide made hot coffee and heated up soup, fussing over him until the color returned to his face. "You're impossibly stubborn. Look who's talking." She smiled despite herself. "You can't ride back in this. Stay tonight. I'll take the chair by the fire. You can have the bed." "I'm not taking your bed." "You will if I have to physically push you into it. You're half frozen, Lucas." "Don't be foolish." They argued about it for 20 minutes before finally compromising. Both of them would sleep by the fire, on opposite sides, fully clothed and entirely proper. Adelaide knew it would cause gossip if anyone found out, but she didn't care. Lucas had ridden through a dangerous storm to check on her. The least she could do was make sure he survived the night. They talked quietly as the fire burned, sharing memories and dreams. Lucas told her about wanting to expand the ranch, maybe add horses to the cattle operation. Adelaide talked about potentially starting a lending library at the school so students could borrow books to read at home. "We make a good team," Lucas said, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "We balance each other. You think through the details I might miss, and I push you to take chances you might avoid." "I never thought I'd find someone who understood me," Adelaide admitted, "who saw past the walls I'd built and decided I was worth the effort anyway." "Adelaide, you're worth everything." She fell asleep to the sound of his breathing, feeling safer than she had in years. The storm broke the next morning, and Lucas reluctantly prepared to return to the ranch. "Come out next Sunday," he said as he saddled his horse. "I want to talk to you about something important." Adelaide's heart skipped. "What kind of something?" "The good kind, I hope." He kissed her cheek. "Be safe this week." The days until Sunday felt impossibly long. Adelaide tried to focus on teaching, but her mind kept wandering to Lucas and what he might want to discuss. Sarah noticed her distraction and teased her mercilessly about it. "He's going to propose," Sarah said with certainty. "Everyone can see it coming." "It's too soon," Adelaide protested. "Thomas has only been gone a year. Thomas was barely your husband." "Stop hiding behind propriety and admit you want this." Did she want it? Adelaide examined her feelings honestly. The thought of marrying Lucas didn't terrify her the way it should. Instead, she felt a cautious excitement, like standing on the edge of something wonderful and being brave enough to jump. Sunday arrived clear and cold. Lucas picked her up in the wagon, and they rode out to the ranch in comfortable silence. But instead of stopping at the house, Lucas drove past it, up into the hills behind the property. He stopped at the oak grove, the same place he'd mentioned in their first real conversation, and helped Adelaide down. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," Lucas said, leading her to a flat rock that overlooked the valley. "I come here when I need to think or when I want to remember why I work so hard." "It's beautiful," Adelaide said, meaning it. The view was spectacular, all rolling hills and open sky. "Adelaide." Lucas took both her hands in his, suddenly looking nervous. "I told you once that I'd be patient, that I'd give you all the time you needed, and I meant that. I still mean it. But I also believe in being honest about what I want, and what I want is to marry you." Adelaide's breath caught. "I know it's only been a few months," Lucas continued. "I know people will talk, and I know you might need more time, but I love you, Adelaide Turner. I love your strength and your doubt and the way you're learning to hope again. I love watching you with the children, seeing how patient you are when they struggle. I love your intelligence and your honesty and the way you challenge me to be better. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you. I want everything." He pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "This was my mother's ring. It's not fancy, but it's real and solid, and I hope that matters more than flash. Will you marry me?" Adelaide looked at the ring, at Lucas's earnest face, at the beautiful land spread out before them. 6 months ago, she had arrived in Sacramento with doubt written on her face, certain that nothing good waited for her here. But Lucas had been patient and devoted, showing her through consistent actions that good men existed, that she deserved happiness, that hope wasn't foolish. "Yes," she said, and watched joy transform his features. "Yes, I'll marry you." Lucas slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply. Adelaide kissed him back, pouring all her hope and love and cautious optimism into it. When they finally broke apart, both were grinning foolishly. "We can have a long engagement if you want," Lucas said. "Whatever you're comfortable with." "Actually, I don't want to wait." Adelaide surprised herself with the words. "I've spent so much time being afraid, Lucas." "I don't want to be afraid anymore. Let's get married soon. This spring, maybe. Are you sure? I don't want you to rush because you think that's what I want. I'm sure. For the first time in years, I'm absolutely certain about something." She looked up at him, this man who had taken her doubt and erased it through patience and devotion. "You've taught me that not everyone leaves, that some people stay and work through problems and mean what they say. I want to marry you, Lucas Vaughn. I want to build a life here with you." They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, and Lucas announced their engagement to Rosa and the ranch hands. Rosa cried and hugged them both, immediately starting to plan a wedding feast. The ranch hands congratulated Lucas, slapping him on the back and teasing him about being tied down. In town, the news spread quickly. Some people thought it was too soon after Thomas's death, but most were happy for Adelaide. Mrs. Patterson was thrilled, hugging Adelaide tightly. "That boy has been mooning over you since August," she said. "I'm so glad you finally saw what everyone else could see." They set the wedding for April, giving them 2 months to prepare. Adelaide continued teaching through the spring term, and Lucas worked on expanding the ranch house to accommodate a wife. He added a parlor and knocked down a wall to make the bedroom larger, working evenings and weekends when he wasn't managing the cattle. Adelaide spent her free time sewing a wedding dress with help from Sarah and Rosa. It was simple but beautiful, cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. She also began quietly packing her belongings from the cottage, preparing to move to the ranch after the wedding. "Are you nervous?" Sarah asked one afternoon as they worked on the dress. "Surprisingly, no. I thought I would be, but I'm not. With Thomas, I was terrified on our wedding day because I knew we didn't really know each other. With Lucas, I feel like I already know him in all the ways that matter. We've talked about everything: money, children, how we want to run the household. There are no secrets or surprises. That's how it should be," Sarah said approvingly. "Marriage is hard enough without going into it blind." The wedding took place on a beautiful April afternoon at the Sacramento church. Adelaide wore her cream dress and carried wildflowers Lucas had picked that morning. Lucas looked handsome in his best suit, his eyes never leaving Adelaide as she walked down the aisle. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows in front of the whole town, promising to love and honor each other through whatever came. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed Adelaide like she was precious and breakable and entirely his. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed twice the number of guests. People danced and laughed and celebrated into the evening. Adelaide found herself pulled into conversations with ranch wives who welcomed her into their circle, offering advice about life on a ranch and promising to visit often. As the sun set, Lucas swept Adelaide into his arms and carried her into the house while guests cheered and whistled. He set her down gently in their bedroom, now properly furnished with a large bed, a dresser, and curtains Adelaide had sewn. "Hello, wife," Lucas said, pulling her close. "Hello, husband." Adelaide wound her arms around his neck. "Are you happy?" deliriously. "You, more than I thought possible." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for being patient with me, for not giving up when I kept pushing you away. You were worth waiting for. You'll always be worth it." He tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I love you, Adelaide Vaughn. I love you too." And saying it felt natural, right, like something she'd been waiting her whole life to say and mean. Their wedding night was tender and careful, Lucas taking his time to make sure Adelaide felt cherished. She had been nervous. Her experience with Thomas limited and not particularly pleasant, but Lucas was different. Patient and attentive, he made her feel beautiful and wanted. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Adelaide's head on Lucas's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "This is real," she whispered. "I keep waiting to wake up and find out it was all a dream." "It's real," Lucas confirmed, running his fingers through her hair. "You're really my wife, we're really in our home, and we're really going to build a life together. No dreams, just reality." Adelaide pressed a kiss to his chest. "I like this reality much better than the one I had planned. Funny how that works sometimes." Adelaide settled into ranch life more easily than she'd expected. She continued teaching through May, then took the summer off as planned. She spent her days helping Rosa in the house, learning the rhythms of ranch work, and occasionally riding out with Lucas to check on the cattle. She had never ridden much before, but Lucas taught her patiently, and soon she was comfortable in the saddle. The ranch hands accepted her presence without complaint, and Adelaide made a point of learning their names and taking interest in their lives. She discovered that Miguel had a wife and 3 children in town, that young James was saving money to buy his own small ranch someday, and that old Henry had been working cattle for 40 years and had stories that could fill books. In June, Adelaide realized she was pregnant. She told Lucas one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably scared the horses. "A baby," he kept saying, his hand on her still flat stomach. "We're having a baby. In January, I think. Maybe February." Adelaide covered his hand with hers. "Are you ready for this?" I've been ready since the day I met you, maybe before." He pulled her onto his lap. "Boy or girl doesn't matter. Healthy is all I care about." "I hope they have your eyes," Adelaide said, "green like the hills in spring. I hope they have your intelligence. And your determination. And your laugh. I love your laugh." The pregnancy was mostly easy, though Adelaide tired quickly and had some morning sickness through the summer. Lucas was attentive to the point of being overprotective, worrying whenever she did anything more strenuous than walking from the house to the garden. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," Adelaide told him after he'd insisted she shouldn't help hang laundry. "I know, but what if you overexert yourself? What if something happens, Lucas?" She took his face in her hands. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, most of them while doing significantly more strenuous work than hanging laundry. I'll be fine and the baby will be fine." Still, she secretly loved his concern. It was so different from Thomas's benign neglect, from growing up with parents who loved her but were too consumed with financial worries to be particularly attentive. Lucas made her feel treasured. In September, Adelaide returned to teaching, though Lucas insisted on driving her to and from town each day rather than letting her stay at the cottage during the week. It made for long days, but Adelaide appreciated the time together, and she was home each evening to help with supper and spend evenings planning for the baby. They converted a small room near their bedroom into a nursery, painting it yellow and filling it with a cradle Lucas built himself. Adelaide sewed blankets and tiny clothes, marveling at how small everything was. Rosa knitted booties and caps, and Sarah organized a party where the ranch wives brought gifts and shared advice. "First baby is always scary," one of the older women said, "but you've got a good husband and good help. You'll be fine." The baby was born on a cold night in late January. Adelaide's labor started in the afternoon, and by evening she was in hard labor. Lucas paced the hallway outside their room while Rosa and Sarah attended Adelaide. The doctor had come from town and assured Lucas that everything was progressing normally, but Lucas couldn't shake his anxiety. After what felt like forever, he heard a baby's cry. He burst into the room to find Adelaide exhausted but beaming, holding a tiny bundle. "It's a boy," she said, tears streaming down her face. "We have a son." Lucas approached slowly, awed by the tiny person in Adelaide's arms. "He's perfect." "Do you want to hold him?" Lucas carefully took his son, cradling him awkwardly but with infinite gentleness. The baby had a shock of dark hair, and when he briefly opened his eyes, they were blue, though Lucas knew they might change color. "What should we name him?" Adelaide asked. They had discussed names for months without settling on anything definite. But looking at his son, Lucas knew exactly what felt right. "What about Daniel? It was my brother's name." "Daniel Vaughn," Adelaide tested. "I like it. Daniel Thomas Vaughn, maybe, to honor both our pasts. That's perfect." Lucas sat beside Adelaide on the bed, their son between them. "Look at what we made. Look at what we built," Adelaide corrected. "A family, a real one. Daniel was a good baby, sleeping well and growing quickly. Lucas was a devoted father, getting up in the night to bring Daniel to Adelaide for feeding, changing diapers without complaint, and spending every free moment holding his son." Adelaide had worried she might not feel the maternal bond people talked about, but she fell in love with Daniel immediately, overwhelmed by the fierce protectiveness she felt for this tiny person. As Daniel grew, the ranch prospered. Lucas expanded his herd and hired 2 more ranch hands. Adelaide returned to teaching when Daniel was 6 months old, bringing him with her to school. The students loved having a baby in the classroom, and Daniel seemed content to sleep or play quietly while Adelaide taught. 2 years after Daniel was born, Adelaide had a daughter they named Margaret, called Maggie from the start. She had Adelaide's blonde hair and Lucas's green eyes, and she was fearless from the moment she could crawl, getting into everything and keeping them constantly on their toes. "She's going to be trouble," Lucas said fondly, watching 2-year-old Maggie try to climb onto a horse by herself. "She's going to be amazing," Adelaide corrected. "Independent and strong, like her mother." They settled into the rhythms of family life. Summers were busy with ranch work and harvest. Winters were quieter, time for school and family dinners and reading by the fire. Daniel grew into a thoughtful boy who loved books and helping his father with the cattle. Maggie was more adventurous, always exploring and asking questions about everything. When Daniel was 5 and Maggie 3, Adelaide had another son, Samuel. And 2 years after that, twin daughters, Lucy and Jane. The house rang with children's laughter and chaos, and Adelaide couldn't imagine it any other way. "5 children," she said one evening when the house was finally quiet, all the children in bed. She and Lucas sat on their porch watching the stars. "Did you ever imagine we'd have 5? "I imagined everything with you," Lucas said, pulling her close. "And somehow reality turned out even better." Adelaide leaned into him, thinking about the woman who had arrived in Sacramento 7 years ago, certain she had nothing left to hope for. That woman would barely recognize her life now, the husband who adored her, the children who filled every day with purpose and joy, the community where she belonged. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For being patient. For not giving up on me when I was so determined to keep everyone at arm's length. For showing me that good things could happen, that I deserved happiness. Adelaide, you did the hard part. You're the one who chose to hope again, to risk being hurt again. All I did was show up consistently." "That's everything, though, showing up consistently, being who you say you are, meaning your promises." She turned to look at him. "You erased my doubt, Lucas, not all at once, but slowly, steadily, until one day I realized I wasn't waiting for disaster anymore. I was just living. That's all I ever wanted for you, to see you really living instead of just surviving." They sat in comfortable silence, Lucas's arm around Adelaide, her head on his shoulder. Inside, their children slept safe and warm. Around them, the ranch sprawled across the California hills, solid and prosperous. Above them, stars wheeled across an endless sky. Adelaide thought about all the twists and turns that had brought her here: her father's business failure, her ill-fated marriage to Thomas, the long journey west to discover her husband was dead and her plans in ruins. At the time, each had seemed like a catastrophe. But each had also been necessary to bring her to this porch with this man, building this life. "I'm happy," she said, and the simple declaration held the weight of all her past doubts overcome, all her fears conquered. "I'm really, truly happy." "Good," Lucas said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "You deserve it." The years continued to roll forward. Daniel grew into a young man who wanted to study law. So Lucas and Adelaide sent him to school in San Francisco, proud of his ambition but missing him terribly. Maggie became the ranch's best rider, working alongside the ranch hands and declaring she'd never leave. Samuel showed an aptitude for numbers and began helping Lucas with the ranch finances. The twins were still young, but already showing distinct personalities. Lucy was quiet and loved drawing, while Jane was boisterous and dramatic. Adelaide continued teaching, watching Sacramento grow from a small frontier town into a more established community. She taught children of families she'd known for years, and sometimes even the children of her former students. She became a respected figure in town, known for her fairness and high standards. Lucas expanded the ranch until it was one of the most successful in the region. He earned a reputation for honest dealing and quality cattle. He served on the school board for 15 years, then the town council. People came to him for advice, and he gave it freely. But through all the years and changes, the core remained the same. Every evening, unless prevented by emergency, Lucas and Adelaide sat together on their porch and talked about their days. They discussed problems, celebrated victories, made plans, and simply enjoyed each other's company. On their 20th anniversary, Lucas took Adelaide back to the oak grove where he'd proposed. 20 years, he said, holding her hand as they looked out over the valley. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like we've always been together. Both, Adelaide agreed. It's both. Any regrets? Adelaide thought about the question seriously. Not about us. Sometimes I wish I'd been braver sooner, that I hadn't wasted so much time being afraid. But then I think maybe I needed that time to fully appreciate what we have. I don't regret a single moment, Lucas said. Not even the months when you were pushing me away, because those months taught me patience. They taught me you were worth waiting for. Adelaide turned to face him fully, taking both his hands in hers. You know what the best part is? I'm still falling in love with you. 20 years, 5 children, countless challenges, and I wake up some mornings and discover something new about you that makes me love you even more. Like what? Like the way you read to the twins every night, doing all the different voices. Or the way you worry about Daniel in the city, but trust him to make good choices. Or the way you've taught Maggie everything about ranching without once suggesting she should do something more ladylike. Adelaide smiled. You're a good man, Lucas Vaughn, the best I've ever known. You make me want to be worthy of you. You already are. You always have been. They stayed at the grove until sunset, watching the light paint the hills gold and purple. When they returned to the ranch, their children had prepared a surprise anniversary dinner with all of Adelaide's favorite foods and a cake Lucy had decorated. To Ma and Pa, Daniel said, home from school for the celebration. Who showed us all what love looks like? To Ma and Pa, the others echoed, raising their glasses. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Adelaide and Lucas sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. We built something good, Adelaide said, looking at the stars. We did, Lucas agreed. And it all started because a woman arrived in Sacramento with doubt written on her face, and I decided she deserved better than doubt. And you gave me patience and devotion until I could believe in something better. We gave each other that. It was never just me. Adelaide leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his presence. She thought about the young widow who had arrived in Sacramento with nothing but disappointment and broken dreams. That woman would have never believed this future was possible. But it was possible, it was real, and it was hers. I love you, she said, simple words that held 20 years of meaning. I love you too, Lucas replied. Always have, always will. They sat together as darkness deepened, watching the lights of their home glow warm against the night. Inside were children they'd raised together, memories they'd built, a life they'd created from nothing but hope and hard work and devotion. Adelaide had arrived in California expecting nothing. Lucas had given her everything. And together, they had built something that would last generations, a family rooted in love, a home filled with joy, and a partnership that proved good things could grow from the hardest soil. She had arrived with doubt written on her face. He had erased it with patience and devotion. And they had lived happily ever after, which turned out to be not an ending at all, but rather the beginning of something beautiful that would continue long after the stars stopped wheeling overhead. 23 years after that first meeting on a dusty road, Adelaide sat in her favorite chair, now a grandmother herself, watching Daniel teach his own son to ride a horse in the same corral where Lucas had once taught him. Maggie ran the ranch alongside her father, as capable as any man. Samuel worked at the bank in Sacramento, but came home every Sunday for dinner. The twins, now young women, were teaching at the school Adelaide had once presided over. Lucas, his dark hair now streaked with silver, sat beside her, his hand in hers as it had been for decades. "Look at what we made," Adelaide said, echoing words Lucas had spoken about their firstborn son all those years ago. "Look at what we built," Lucas corrected, echoing her response. "A legacy. Not just children, but values. Not just a ranch, but a home. Not just a marriage, but a partnership. Do you remember the day we met? When I was standing on that road, trying to decide whether to keep going or turn back. I remember thinking you looked like someone deciding whether to give up or fight, and I remember being grateful when you chose to fight." Adelaide squeezed his hand. "I'm still fighting. For you, for our family, for the life we've built. Every day is a choice to keep building, keep growing, keep loving. That's all any of us can do," Lucas said. "Choose love again and again until it becomes as natural as breathing." Their grandson successfully mounted his horse, and Daniel's whoop of pride carried across the yard. Adelaide watched her son, her serious, thoughtful firstborn, lift his own son in triumph, continuing the cycle of love and encouragement that Lucas had started. "We did good," Adelaide said softly. "We did better than good," Lucas replied. "We took broken pieces and made something whole. We took doubt and turned it into certainty. We took two lonely people and created a family that will continue long after we're gone. Not too soon, I hope." Lucas laughed. "Not if I have anything to say about it. I plan on sitting on this porch with you for at least another 20 years, watching our grandchildren grow and our children thrive. Then that's what we'll do." Adelaide leaned into him, comfortable and content, together like everything else. The sun set over the California hills, painting them in shades of gold and purple, the same colors that had marked thousands of sunsets over their shared life. Inside the house, Rosa prepared supper for the family gathering that evening. In the corrals, horses whinnied and cattle lowed. Children's laughter echoed across the yard. And on the porch, two people who had found each other against all odds sat together, their hands intertwined, their hearts full. Their doubts long since erased by the simple, steady power of love kept and promises honored. Adelaide had arrived in Sacramento with doubt written on her face, expecting nothing and prepared for disappointment. Lucas had seen past the doubt to the woman beneath, and with patience and devotion had shown her that some dreams do come true, some people do keep their promises, and some love stories do have happy endings. Their story had been one of those love stories, and it continued still, written in the lives of their children and grandchildren, in the prosperous ranch that spread across the Golden Hills, in the community they had helped build, and most of all in the simple, profound truth that love, when nurtured with patience and devotion, could overcome any doubt and create something beautiful that would last forever.